So wonderful to sit with you all. This has been a wonderful 3 days so far of sesshin for me. And I hope it has been good for you as well. I just am excited that we have 2 people all the way from England, Great Britain, here. Linda and Annie, how fabulous is that? Really great. Yeah. And we have some new people who have never sat with us before, which I think is wonderful and brave also, that you're really just getting right in there with your practice. Marcia, or is it Marcia? Marcia or Marcia? One. And Paul, wonderful to meet you both. And then we've got the stalwart other members who have been at sesshin before. And oh, Karen, it's Karen's first time with us as well from Lockport, Illinois. So, I wanted to start by reading Joan Sutherland's couple of paragraphs that she had in Buddha Dharma, and the title of which is Everything is Enlightenment. There is mad discipline and insane persistence on this path, but they're in the service of something more fruitful than certainty, control, and will. They're in the service of availability. Just keep showing up. Sit the meditation, attend the retreat, absorb the teachings, face the fear, feel the sorrow, endure the boredom, explore the doubt. Stay open to the disturbing and also the knee-buckling beautiful in your life. And this paragraph follows that beautiful paragraph. That being said, if resistance rises in you, sit with it until you can tell whether it's a habit of exile or a warning that something really isn't right. The path of awakening involves a lot of deconstruction of the self, which can be difficult, even shattering at times, but it should not involve harm. We awaken together. And the greatest gift we give to each other's awakening is to make a field where it is safe to take risks. Let me read that again. We awaken together, and the greatest gift we give to each other's awakening is to make a field where it is safe to take risks. So this container of sesshin for me is that kind of container that we're building together. A place of safety where we can really practice, facing our fears that arise, facing the boredom, facing grief. And then just really trying to be really mindful to notice when maybe something really isn't right here and that we need to do something about it. I think that's important to have that balance that Roshi spoke about yesterday that I loved. yin and yang, that balance. The image of the earth as having those yin and yang with the breath, right? Like the earth is also breathing too. And the big polar ice caps help with that good in breath and good out breath. And with the polar ice caps disappearing, the breath can get uneven there. And just as in us, when our breath isn't good, we can get sick, and no breath is death. So it's really been quite a year. I was just looking back at the year that we've had, and 9 months ago was when the virus hit, right? And we were in the middle of session. On the third day, we said, okay, there's a case in Oak Park. It's time to close this session, and we sent people home. That was in March. So here we are. It's like, okay, what do we do with this in our real life? This is what is happening, right? What do we do? We've had a study circle also that began studying David Brazier's book, The Dark Side of the Mirror, that Roshi referred to yesterday. Forgetting the Self in Dogen's Genjo Koan. Thank you, Annie. You have it, yes. Great. And Genjo Koan was one of the first things. It was the first thing that Dogen wrote when he came back from China. And Dogen is the founder of our Soto Zen Buddhist sect. So I believe this was in about 1300, right? He was a Buddhist priest, and he asked the question, if we are enlightened as we are with this wonderful Buddha nature, why do we have to practice? And he wasn't getting any answers in Japan, so he went off to China, where the Buddhist masters were. And he found a teacher. And he was awakened with Ru Jing, his teacher, when his teacher mentioned dropping off the body and mind. He came back and he wrote Genjo Koan, which means Genjo, and David Brazier is saying this. He says, Genjo is the appearance of a truth that we do not contrive and can't destroy. Genjo. And koan, Brazier says Dogen's essential meaning for koan is playing one's proper part. It has to do with how one perceives and experiences the world. It's the substance of the religious life. It's not about one's perfection in doing right, but one's recurrent learning from encountering one's human nature, one's lack of moral courage, lack of self-control, and personal blindness. Right? Don't we come up against this every day if we're mindful of what's going on here? So it's this recurring coming up, and it's our recurring learning, like, oh, there it is again. Okay, there it is again, and this is how I'm acting. Okay. That's koan, playing one's part. So Genjo Koan, that's the name of this book. So there's this truth that arises, can't destroy it, or can we make it up? And then koan is how do we play our proper part in this? I'm quoting some more from David because I really like it. He says in what Genjo Koan proposes. He says the underlying message of Genjo Koan is identical to Shakyamuni Buddha. Take refuge and go forth. So taking refuge, this is something we study, you know, when people start to study the precepts, the Zen precepts. So taking refuge means living a life of faith in the world as it actually is. So to Dogen, one's natural duty in relation to the Dharma, or one's duty is to be natural, because they're, you know, one's duty and the Dharma are the same thing. It's reality. Living in a vigorous yet unpretentious manner. Doing one's natural duty without fuss. And when one does so, things happen. And what does happen is the wondrous penetration of Dharma into the infinite diversity of conditioned existence. So he's also talking about this humility that we have to work on. Most of us have to work on anyway, because the self can get, you know, kind of inflated a lot. And we think we are it, which, you know, we are, but at the same time, we're not. And he's talking about, you know, when we can really forget about the self by really this humility, then we become a mirror. It's saying we become dark. Like in a pond, you can only see a reflection in the pond when one side is dark, you know, the dark bottom. Then it can become a mirror and reflect the myriad dharmas, 10,000 dharmas. Dogen paints image after image of the totality of imperfection constituting perfection. I like that. The totality of imperfection constituting perfection, because, you know, that allows me to be okay with who I am, right? I am imperfect, highly imperfect. So to say that image after image of the totality of imperfection constituting perfection, yin and yang together constituting the Tao, the upper realm and the lower constituting the complete circle. So it's about returning to being natural and less worried about ourself. He quotes Yui Butsu, Yo Butsu. Whenever we feel that we are useless, there is something that we should know, namely, that we have become afraid of becoming small. I think that's a fear of many people, right? Being small, not being worthwhile, because we're so small. So that's wonderful to look at, right? The need to be noticed, to be appreciated, to be respected, right? We all have those needs. Those are basic human needs. Nothing wrong with that. And Roshi mentioned yesterday, so beautiful, how he reminds us of the possibility of living a larger life. You know, one where we are intimate in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. When you can just open up your heart, let go of your habits and routines, and just show up. That's what we're practicing here on our cushions or on our chairs during this retreat. And his definition of Shen, right, defined as transcendental illumination or light. It's when yin and yang are in balance. He also mentioned talking stories, talks or telling stories. And in Hawaii, growing up, telling stories was a really important thing that we did when we got together as a family or with friends. I remember when I was little, my father would have his friends over, and most of them were hunting friends. I don't know, does anybody here have hunting in your family? Raise your hand. You know, any father or family members or cousins hunt. All right, great, okay. Well, my family, my father was a hunter, my two brothers, three brothers are all hunters on the big island of Hawaii. And so I am a country girl. How many of you are country people? Consider yourself a country person. Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, kind of, 4, maybe. Wow, not many country people, country mice here in the city, right? Right, well, I am a country girl, and I remember on one of my first session up at Zen Mountain Center when Roshi was doing his what do you call that? Where you're the head monk training, right? That was a long time ago in the night. What was Ango, right? We're doing Ango. And one of my Zumi Roshi's successors was giving the talk, and he was great. And he said, "I'm a country boy. If I get cut, I bleed country." I thought, yeah, I'm a country girl too. So I thought that was fabulous. Anyway, so my father would have his friends over, a lot of young men who he would take hunting with him. And a lot of them, I think, well, there were some locals and some from the little bigger cities, but he would take them hunting and they would love it, right? Going up to Mauna Kea, being in wide open space. This is a huge mountain. Mauna Kea is from under sea level, from the earth, it is 32,000 feet high. Above sea level, it is almost 14,000 feet high. So they would go walking all over that mountain, massive mountain, in search of wild game. Mostly it was sheep, sometimes goats, you know. I'm sorry, I have to tell this story for any vegans here. But anyway, they would be telling the stories of their adventures out hunting, and they would be laughing and having a great time. And all of us kids were around that little kitchen table, just into it also, and just in the thrill of the story. So my brother just texted me a few days ago, and he was chuckling to himself. And I said, he said, remembering a funny Thanksgiving story. And I said, which one? So he said, this is the one about the wild turkey. And I had to laugh because I totally remember that one as well. So he went with my father and a family friend hunting. And my brother Carl is a very good shot on the rifle. So they went up a Mauna Kea and he shot a wild turkey. It was like the day before Thanksgiving. And at our Thanksgiving get-togethers, there are 5 kids and their families. And so it was a nice big get-together. And all the delicious food, it'd be a potluck, and the local food, there'd be fried reef fish that's so crispy, you can eat the bones. There would be smoked wild pork, beef, those wild pigs. There would be limpets that were salted called opihi, sort of sushi, macaroni salad. I mean, there would be lots of yummy food there. Well, anyway, Carl and Dad and Mr. Degawa went hunting and got this turkey, and they got home and they were so tired. They'd been gone all day. They forgot the turkey in Carl's 69 Dodge truck overnight. Okay, so the next morning, my parents went out and they took out the feathers, got the turkey all ready. And somebody had told my father at the hunter checking station, a good way to cook this turkey is to put it in a bag. Remember those bags and then you cook it and it's all juicy and all the meat just kind of falls away from the bones. So that's what my dad did. He had a bag and he cooked up the turkey in the bag. So when Roshi and I got to my brother's house, I opened the door and this awful smell just kind of hit me. I said, what is that horrible smell? And nobody really could answer. Well, what had happened was evidently part of that wild turkey had gone bad, had started to rot from the inside. So, my dad and mom, they didn't know. They put it in the bag, and when they started cooking it, the smell got even more intense. And then when he opened the bag, then the smell pervaded the house. And I was like, what's that smell? And nobody seemed to have an answer about it. Anyway, there was a butterball turkey and there was this wild turkey right next to it that my father was carving up. He had lost his sense of smell, because he had asthma and was taking all these inhalers, and he lost his sense of smell. So he had no idea. And he kept offering this. He was carving up the wild turkey and offering it to everybody, my brother's friends. And I remember saying, no, thank you. And Mr. Degawa, he's a retired Japanese man who would come to live in Waimea to retire with his wife. He said, do I have to eat that? And then I think I was the one that probably said, no. And so everybody declined except our friend Dean. Dean was someone who actually lived in his car for a large amount of years. But then right before we left, he came to live with us since we had an extra room. He was the only one who tried it. And he had a piece, Carl was remembering it, and he put, I think Carl asked him, well, how does it taste? And he said, well, I put a bunch of cranberries on the piece and it kind of tastes like cottage cheese. Well, maybe there was some probiotics in there that we don't, kimchi has got this horrible smell, but it's really good for you. So the moral of that story is check the inside too. Go inward, go inward. Don't forget about the inside. It's not only outside that counts. And that's what we're doing here, aren't we? We're taking the step backward here. We're really trying to pause in our crazy, crazy lives and trying to just breathe and get grounded to the earth again, this important, huge planet who is really us as well. There's just really no separation here. We've had really excellent Sunday morning Zen talks. Also, I want to thank Shishin as well for his work on getting wonderful speakers. Ellen Burks came and talked about the inner spirituality of Christianity and Zen. And when she said that, a light bulb kind of went off here. And I said, ooh, interspirituality of two very distinct spiritual practices. And she said, you got to go deep. It's hard enough doing one and two. That's like hard. And so then I thought, ooh, the inner spiritual practice of hula and Zen. And it was really nice to get support from her for the practice that I'm doing in hula. It was just really, really wonderful for me. And how those two spiritual practices are harmonizing in me, how they are integrating in me, and how I'm able to articulate that integration. Slowly, it's happening slowly over time. I've been practicing hula seriously since 1988. But I started when I was 6. I remember asking, my mother told me that I asked her to take me to hula class at 6 years old. And she did. Thank you, Mom. And then Pat Takeo Farrell, who used to live here in Oak Park, and now she's in California, I think outside of San Francisco, managing a beautiful retreat center. Her talk, she spoke about her vows as a Dominican sister. And when she talked about her vow of obedience, and she told us what the Latin word obedience means. It means to listen. Another light bulb went lit for me. To listen deeply. This is her vow of obedience. And I remembered when I was studying with the Hawaiian healer, Henry Awai, started in 1995. I was only able to study with him for 5 years before he died. In the very first class, he told us the first expectation he had for us training to be healers was ho'olohe, to listen, to listen. He didn't explain it. He did not explain it. So we had to figure it out ourselves, which is, I think, really great to do. So I've been, I initially thought, okay, to listen, right? To listen to things around me, to listen inside, So when Pat said the Latin for obedience is to listen, I went, that is a deep, deep spiritual practice. And isn't that what we're doing when we are sitting on the cushion? We are practicing listening. And the other thing that Ellen Burke said, which I absolutely loved, she said that Zazen was silent, wordless prayer. And again, when she said that, I was like blown away, because I was searching for an articulation of Zazen in the West, in our Christian context. And that to me was like, right, silent, wordless prayer. Now, a lot of the times, our minds are not so silent, right? And we're working, that's what we're doing. We're learning to work with that busyness in our mind by just getting our body kind of settled. So we're not moving around all the time. Movement is good, most definitely, they're good, but to stop and to just work with trying to one thing at a time, right? One thought at a time. So I love that. The other thing that Papa Henry told us, that if you want to be a healer, you have to be in pule, in prayer, 24 hours a day. And I was like, what does that mean? Being in prayer 24 hours a day? Of course, he didn't explain what that meant, right? But with this definition of Zazen, I was like, okay, I kind of had a little clue that Zazen had something to do with this 24-hour a day pule prayer, 24-hour a day pule. And to hear Ellen say that, it was like, of course. Because when we bring awareness into our everyday life, isn't that bringing something sacred to something sacred? The other thing that Papa Henry said, he had 5 expectations for us as healers. The second one was ho'oma kau kau, to be prepared. To me, that means practice. Our practice of Zazen, our practice of bringing our practice into our daily life, bringing this awareness. He also talked about the third expectation was ho'omai kai, to respect all and everything, he said. Respect, a basic human need. Joan Halifax, in an interview she did, she said that she felt that positive regard for others is critical. And much of what we've seen in our world, is really counter to that. It's a kind of politics of disrespect that breeds unwholesomeness. Even though we might be in a different camp, she says, or disagree with an individual, we have to bring respect into our interactions and hold each other in positive regard. That is a spiritual practice right there. The fourth expectation, and he just, listed these expectations, no explanation. The fourth one was ho'olauna itamea maikai, to sacrifice. And I know here in the West, we don't seem to like that word. Well, it is what it is, it's our culture. But to sacrifice, what can we sacrifice? Being right all the time, being perfect. Those would be good things to sacrifice, don't you? It's a good practice. And the fifth expectation, ho'o manawa nui, to be patient. So that is foundational. It's a bodhisattva practice, a paramita, the practice of patience in our life. It's foundational. We are practicing patience on the cushion. So for me, Zazen, helped me practice all these expectations. He also said you have to learn how to take care of yourself. That is very important. How to take care of your physical body, your mental body, your spiritual body. He said you have to learn how to pray. I think Zazen is that prayer for me. You have to be pono, you have to be right with yourself and with your God. Righteous. Righteous, not in the way of being haughty or, but righteous and just knowing about that balance with yin and yang. And he said, be really important to your own self. Be really important to your own self. And of course, there's the balance about, being humble and all, but I think that's a little bit different. I think you have to really love yourself here. And it's a practice. It is a practice. Another quote from Joan in that article, Joan Halifax Roshi. I also think it's important to have a base motivation that is fundamentally unselfish, where we're not just out for ourselves. So there's this balance, right? You got to have regard for yourself and also for others. Our leaders need to think in more noble terms of how we can be of service to all beings. Embodiment is another critical factor. Our leaders should be grounded in their bodies and not living a dissociated life on a virtual level. It's hard these days, where more and more we are virtual. We know from research in neuroscience that if you are able to tune into your own physical experience, interoceptivity, you are better able to experience empathy for others because these use the same set of neural circuits. So we have to learn how to be in tune with our own physical being, and that will help with our empathy towards others. We're not separate, which we are learning that we are not in this age of the virus. So the definition of interoception is the perception of sensations from inside the body and includes the perception of physical sensations related to internal organ functions such as heartbeat, respiration, satiety, as well as the autonomic nervous system activity related to emotions. So being really in touch with whether we're full or not at meals, how we're feeling, angry, sad. And then most recently, Norman Fisher gave a wonderful talk. And he started out by acknowledging grief. And he said, grieving is important. It's a spiritual practice. So I took that to heart because in my hula classes, right after our 10th anniversary celebration, which was wonderful, I started the students learning a dance called Poliahu for the snow goddess of Mauna Kea. And let me see if I can get a picture up here for you. Here it is. This picture is by the famous artist Mayumi Oda. She's known as the Matisse of Japan. She makes these huge, wonderful prints. And she lives on the big island of Hawaii right now. One of her prints I know is, I think at Upaya, a huge image in Upaya. They have one at the Soto Mission in Kona. This is a rendition of Poliahu, the snow goddess of Mauna Kea, who also is the embodiment of compassion, like Kuan Yin. So you see Poliahu, and there's the mountain in the upper left-hand corner with the sun, the snow. It snows on Mauna Kea, so she is the goddess of snow. There's the two wild pigs that they have here at her, right below her lotus, and all of the different kinds of pineapple, and then there's a drum, a Hawaiian drum, and a Hawaiian gourd. So what's interesting about Poliahu is, perhaps at the same time that she was known for her compassionate acts, she had a really devastating love affair with a demigod who was really looking for the most beautiful woman in Hawaii to marry. And her name was Laie Kawai, and he, on his way searching for her, he went to Maui and met a Maui princess who was so beautiful that he kind of, had a little affair with her and actually promised himself to her to marry. And then he went up to the volcano area where this famous Laie, beautiful woman was, and he had brought a feathered cape for her. But he kind of crept through the bushes to look at her house, and he saw that her house was this beautiful, the roof was made of amazing bird feathers. And he, his desire for her was, he was just ashamed that his little cloak was just nowhere near, her roof. So he crept away. And on his way back, he met Poliahu, this beautiful woman on the Hamakua coast. And, you know, he falls in love with her. And they actually marry. And then, though, she hears about this Maui princess that he had first, you know, promised his love to. So what she did was, on the night of their wedding, she actually sent freezing energy to the Maui princess, basically, you know, freezing her so they could never consummate their marriage. So what's really interesting to me is that, you know, you can have these normal human emotions, I would say, in somebody as who is revered as the goddess of compassion. I don't know if I said that quite right, but basically it's, you know, we're human, we can make mistakes, but we also have this huge capacity for good. And what she did was, whenever it was the farmers were having a dry year, she would make it rain. Whenever fishermen were lost at sea, she would help them find their way back. Compassionate. Here's another image. Poliahu, by Herbert Kane, artist. He was a wonderful artist in Hawaii as well. So anyway, my hula students were really studying this dance, which talks about her heartbreak of what happened with this demigod. So it was really an honoring of grief. And they worked on it for about 6 weeks. You know, to embody this grief is, I think, very healing. And I know for a couple of the women, you know, it was very meaningful for them. And Joan had this to say about grief. Among women and men, there is a tremendous well of grief that has within it the potential for profound social transformation. When we open to the truth of the suffering of children, I would say ourselves, our loved ones, and our environment, we can turn our grief into power to help serve the world. Isn't that beautiful? When we open to the truth of suffering of ourselves, our family, our environment, we can turn our grief into power to help serve the world. So I want to repeat Joan Sutherland's, right? Just keep showing up, sit the meditation, attend the retreat, absorb the teachings, face the fear, feel the sorrow, endure the boredom, explore the doubt, stay open to the disturbing, and also the knee-buckling beautiful in your life. So we have some time for questions or discussion. Appreciate anyone's thoughts. Yes, Mark.
Oh, Sensei, that was fabulous, just fabulous. I I was really taken by your discussion about compassion in this last story, and thinking about how true an issue that is for me, particularly, I guess, today when I want to have compassion for everyone, and that yet in the face of our political strife, it's been very difficult. And as I was listening to you, I suddenly remembered that even the Buddha wasn't always compassionate. He had a hard time allowing women into the Sangha. Not very compassionate at all, and yet finally he did. But I'm so glad you reminded us about this, how it's okay. We can try to be as compassionate and empathetic to ourselves and others as, but we're human. Thank you.
Annie.
Oh, thank you, June. That was just so heartbreaking. It broke my heart. I don't know if I could talk now, but I'll try. I especially enjoyed the stories you told, and the one about the hunters, especially now during this time when everyone is a vegan. And I feel guilty because every once in a while I do eat meat. So it was good to hear about these hunters on that level. And you wove such a beautiful tapestry about all the different traditions and how important it is to respect oneself and to have compassion for others at the same time. I'll give you a little example. I'm living with a woman who owns the house, and I'm renting. And it's now with COVID, it's a great opportunity, you know, to really polish that diamond of compassion, because we bump into each other a lot. And, you know, it's like, I want my space, and we're both in the kitchen at the same time, and you can't fit there. So one has to wait for the other to go, and I'm hungry and I want to eat right away, and I have to wait. And it's just like, what an opportunity. I keep telling myself when this sort of anger, you know, not sort of anger, but anger and impatience wells up inside of me. So, yeah, I'm working with that, and it's getting better. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it is getting better. And the last thing I want to say is about the grief, that that the grief can be channeled into really creative, constructive ways, because it can be so overwhelming, or the sadness about what's happening to people can be so, in a way, it can be debilitating. It can be paralyzing if I get stuck worried about that. But to channel that, I think is a wonderful thought, and a wonderful way to use that grief and sadness about the pain in the world. Thank you so much, June.
Thank you, Annie. Yeah, that, you know, that when those feelings bubble up, you know, even grief, you know, why is it that it's so hard to bear witness to it? You know, why? I see it in myself too. You know, I want to do something else. I want to distract myself versus just kind of hanging out. It's such a sweet, small thing, you know. There's this beautiful poem from the first free women, the poems of the early Buddhist nuns. This, it's Vasetti. It's a short poem. When a child dies, everyone grieves, but a mother's grief is different, not more real or more important, just different. I can talk about it like this now. Back then, I just wandered from place to place. I don't know if I ate. I don't know if I slept. From the bottom of that darkness, I heard a voice. It was just a whisper, so I leaned towards it and became a bucket pulled slowly up from the bottom of a well. In the same way, I called out to my grief and drew it towards me. I held my grief and gently rocked it. Shh, I said, there, 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 there. People sometimes ask, wasn't it painful? Weren't you afraid? Yes, it was painful. So is giving birth. Oh, my heart, you mustn't fear the pain.
Sensei, thank you so much for just a beautiful, beautiful talk. And good morning, everyone. Roshi, I really enjoyed you sharing about your brother sending you this nugget of laughter from something in a tradition. And it just made me understand that if I just take some time and reflect on just those really great guttural laughter times with friends and family, and reach out, especially over the holidays, and just send a text of a reminder, just what that can do on the other, for them, just to send some opportunities for reflection and, how that could inspire these ideas of still being together and still belonging and having, that intimacy, even though not being able to be together. And I think that kind of laughter and joy will be really helpful. I mean, for me, but for others too, because there's a lot of those. And this is a good time to bring those back up, since it's hard to make new ones right now. So that was just great. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, Roshi is saying in his group chat, I'll always remember that Thanksgiving in Hawaii as the revenge of the turkey.
uh,
Oh, gosh.
Did Dean get ill?
No, I don't think so. I think he was okay. He just had a little bit. Everybody else said, no, thank you.
Dean moved from Hawaii to, I think he lives in Denver now, and he had a stroke.
No, honey, that's not Dean, honey. That's not Dean.
Well, that's not Dean.
No, that's not Dean.
I'm sorry, I got confused.
That's all right.
The Dean lived on the beach, right? He was homeless for.
Right, he lived in his car.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and he was a carpenter, kind of a handyman. So he did a lot of great work too. Yeah. Well, it's 11:30. I think it's time for lunch. Lunch and rest period, and maybe a walk in the beautiful sunshine here. All right, so thank you very much, everyone.